Eagle Mountain. I'm Melissa Clark. I serve on your city council, and I'm here tonight for a Be Ready Eagle Mountain video class. Tonight we have my friends Jeff Weber. He is our city's emergency manager. Jeff, do you want to take a few seconds to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Melissa. I'm Jeff Weber. I'm the Eagle Mountain City Emergency Manager and Facilities and Operations Director. I've been with the city for 20 years. It's been a fantastic job, and yeah, I just love it. Love the people, love everything about it. Especially the volunteers that help us out. You know, it's great that they come in and do these trainings and stuff, and I love it. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff, for introducing yourself. And Jeff is right. We have the most amazing volunteers in our city. Tonight, we're also joined by David Becar. He's the head of our volunteer emergency communications team for Eagle Mountain, and he helps all of us learn how to do ham and all sorts of really cool things. David, do you want to take a quick second and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is David Becar, Kilo India 6, Oscar Sierra Sierra. That is my amateur radio call sign. Both, when I came here, Melissa and Jeff were not licensed operators. And since I have been here, they are now both licensed operators. Kilo Juliet 7, Kilo Hotel Lima, and Kilo Juliet 7, Kilo Golf Whiskey. So they have both gone to the work to get their license, and I hope all of you will understand how important this could be in your future. We're going to go on with the next slide, and it's going to be a video of showing a lot of different emergencies or disasters. Right after that video, we're going to talk a little bit about preparing and planning for disasters. So next slide up is the video.
It started off as a shake and then really turned into more of a swing.
Large chunks of buildings fell to the streets as people rushed for cover.
The skyscrapers nearby were swaying like trees in the wind.
I did think at one point that I really might die here.
And then round two as the tsunami sirens wail.
You're seeing live footage of a tsunami engulfing the port area.
When the ominous Black Sea attacked this island nation Friday, it left behind a massive trail of destruction that is getting worse by the hour.
A giant tsunami wave crashes into the Fukushima Daiichi power plant, seriously damaging the building's reactors.
The Japanese Prime Minister Naoto Kan said today the disaster is the worst crisis for Japan since World War II.
The National Weather Service in Birmingham, Alabama has issued a tornado warning for Tuscaloosa County. A tornado warning means that a tornado has been spotted heading for your area. Seek shelter in an interior.
This has been the country's worst and deadliest tornado outbreak since the Great Depression.
Governor Deal declared a state of emergency in 16 counties.
You'd think the death toll will go up.
Yes, sir, and we do.
Oh gosh, that is a monster tornado.
The tornado moved slowly 6 miles through the center of Joplin. The town is now effectively cut in half.
It was just crazy. It was like a jumbo jet was landing on your house.
I love you.
It's just flattened.
I really was not prepared for what I saw when I got down here.
Search and rescue crews sift through the rubble trying to locate missing loved ones, and the death toll moves past 100.
It is a huge monumental flood. We're living historic times at this point.
We've almost had a foot this morning, and it will continue to rise and inundate areas of the city.
We're seeing entire trailer parks engulfed with water, people having to grab their belongings and move out.
We need FEMA, we need Red Cross, we need every kind of help that we can get.
You don't give up on your home. Keep fighting.
trembling, and the rocks are falling down.
Good evening. The New Zealand city of Christchurch has been reduced to ruins by an earthquake, with dozens killed and unknown numbers of people still trapped in the rubble.
Can you call out to us, please?
The center just a few miles from this city of several 100,000 people.
I mean, looking around, there was just, people hysterical, not knowing really what to do next.
Magnitude 6.3 quake left a lasting impression on the landscape and on the people.
Flames raging out of control in northeast Arizona.
This is exactly the kind of thing we hoped wouldn't happen.
The way this thing is working, you may not have that much time.
Fire officials are putting out the order to hundreds that it's time to move to safety.
We packed up for everything that we could. Memories and clothes.
We don't want to leave. I'm going to cry. We don't want to leave.
Irene, roughly the size of Europe.
It is staying on course to head north, with major American cities still in its crosshairs.
Shelves emptying in the scramble for last-minute supplies and food to last 3 days.
New York evacuated about 137,000 people in the low-lying sections of Manhattan.
What we also saw was a lot of flooding. We're talking ankle deep, knee deep, waist deep.
This is chaos. I never saw anything like this in my life.
A massive dust storm rolled through Phoenix. It was more than 1.5 miles high. Take a look at this.
It came roaring into town at 60 miles per hour.
1 man dead, more than a dozen injured in multiple pileups involving 24 cars, trucks, and semis across Arizona Tuesday.
It reminded me of footage I've seen of war zones like in Iraq. Smoke everywhere.
Officials in Turkey say many people have died due to a massive earthquake.
The quake registered 7.2 on the scale, strong enough to cause serious damage.
Thousands panicking rushed into the streets.
Rescue teams have been working furiously, digging around the clock to try and rescue those that are still caught beneath the rubble.
2 days after that massive earthquake struck, a miracle in the rubble. A 2-week-old baby pulled alive from a collapsed building.
There's no doubt in my mind what the people of this community can do. There's no doubt in my mind that Joplin will rebuild.
Tears flow as many people are waiting for word on their loved ones, and comfort is all they can give each other.
Talk to one another, help each other out, do the very best you can. We will come through this.
We're going to keep helping these people. This is what we enlisted for.
The things that people need right now, we're preparing. Water, blankets, medical supplies.
We're not going to give up. We're going to go home.
And the next slide we're going to talk about is types of emergencies. Here in Utah, the most common emergency, or at least from the history I've done, would be flooding. There are many types of flooding that have taken place because of it. You could be involved in a car accident, loss of power, earthquakes, fires, windstorms. When I was here in Utah once, there was a windstorm that ripped off a bunch of glass off of where the Utah Jazz used to play. I think it was called the Salt Palace, and all these other places. So in your life, are you prepared for one of these disasters or emergencies? One of the things that prompted me to become a licensed operator was my family was evacuated in California because of a fire. And we evacuated to a family's home in Hollywood, and all surrounding their home was another fire. So even with all the best planning, things will happen. We're going to go on to our next slide.
Dave, real quick, I just want to add that I think the cool thing for us to remember is that certainly there's these big emergencies, but like for most moms, there's lots of little emergencies too. Like maybe you took your kids to go hike in the canyon and someone got hurt, or, you know, it's those everyday emergencies that we also prepare for. So I love this class. Thank you.
Thank you. The very first one on the list was a car accident. It may not even involve you, but you could be trapped behind several cars and not be able to move for several hours. I have been in one of those situations, and so do you have an emergency pack in your car? So these are the kind of questions that I'd like each of you to ask yourself in preparing and planning. How can I receive emergency alerts and warnings? Well, there is a way for you to be able to receive those on your cell phone as long as your cell phone is operational. What is your emergency shelter plan? If you could not live in your home or were evacuated, where would you go? Where would you stay? What are my evacuation plans? What things would you take? In Southern California, I knew of a family just finished building $1 million home, and their home just 2 or 3 months after they moved in burned to the ground. What would you take when you were evacuated? What is my family or household communications plan? If you're one place, your spouse is another place, your children are another place, how do you communicate? How do you plan that? Do I have an emergency preparedness go kit, something I could grab that would help sustain our family for a few days if we had to evacuate our home? How will the coronavirus affect my emergency plan? Today, it's very difficult to be able to go out in public, and so your plan has to be considerate of the coronavirus. And any of you guys have any comments, please share them, Jeff or Melissa. And other things that you might need. Some of your family may need special medications. Do you have a supply? Do you have access to that? Okay, we're going to move on after you've asked these questions. And let's start getting into the nitty gritty. Okay, what about an emergency?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to add, one of the things when I have friends and neighbors ask me, like, what should I put into a kit? I always say, imagine that you're going to go on a road trip. What do you need to have in your car to be okay? What do you need if you can't stop at like a gas station or a Walmart to pick stuff up? Start thinking with that, and that kind of helps put you in the right mind frame of what to put in your go bag. And I also tell people, what did you need in a diaper bag? What are some of those things? And that's a really great place for most people to start because they feel familiar with those types of bags. I think emergency bags get kind of overwhelming sometimes. So those are some basics.
All right. One of the critical things that happen in an emergency is communications. How are you? Your children are someplace different than you and your spouse. So how will that communications take place? What communications options are there? I guess you could take a can and a string, but you'd have some very limited communications with that. Cell phone operations may be limited, but you may be able to send text messages. Well, there's lots of other radio systems that you could use. In front of me, I have all these radios. I have a CB radio. It's kind of an old school radio. There's the FRS radio. What the heck is an FRS radio? That's the family radio services. I have family radio services. They are radios that are very inexpensive, would have a limited range, but might work fine. You could put them in a child's backpack and you could have a radio that you could communicate with. MURS, multi-use radio services. That's another radio service. In addition to amateur radio, there's GMRS, there's general mobile radio services. They have a more expanded range than FRS and MURS, but the most beneficial radio system is the amateur radio system. Somebody have a comment?
I actually do. Can you help us understand why just a regular old walkie-talkie may not be the best thing in the event of like a really big emergency? What are some of the reasons why that might fail us?
Right. A walkie-talkie usually runs on the family radio services and had a limited range. Now, do you have batteries in those radios or do you have spare batteries? It would be a very limited range, line of sight, and you would be, because of the low power of those radios, might be very ineffective. Very similar to the MURS radios. They're almost the same. CB radios, same thing, very low power. None of those require a license to operate, but they have very limited range. but they're very inexpensive. So any communications is better than no communication. So you could be thinking about that, adding that to your family plan. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah.
But we talked. Go ahead. We talked a little bit about amateur radio, and I am a big fan of amateur radio. In every emergency that's taken place, almost inevitably, amateur radio has come to the rescue. I could think of experience after experience after experience that I've done some research on, and amateur radio seems to be one of those tools that gets through. The very many government agencies rely on amateur radio in the event of an emergency or disaster. Let's move on.
One of the things real quick, that I wanted to say, I remember when we were at Disneyland as a family with like my husband's brothers and sisters and their families, and we had those little like two-way radios thinking, oh, this would be great. You know, like we'll communicate, this will be our communications plan. But there were so many people in that little space that they were on the same like band and different things with us, so that we were hearing other people's communications and stuff. So that was one of the reasons why I really wanted to learn amateur radio, so that I could have that dedicated and a little bit better, higher level of communication. So just something to think about.
Thank you very much for those comments, Melissa. A lot of us, in the event of an emergency, I had an experience where I did not have a phone, and all of my phone numbers for my emergency contacts were in my phone. I was in an airport. We were trapped. I could not make my flight. I handed my phone to my wife because it had all the information for her flight, and I had no way to contact family members except with the phone numbers that I had with me in my brain, which wasn't very many. So one of the things for our emergency communications and emergency planning is creating a list of contact people outside your local area or inside your local area, their numbers and addresses. It would be very helpful to have their emails. In the FEMA website, and we'll review that, it has a list of a template for you to keep emergency contact and information written down. It would be very beneficial in the event of an emergency that you have written contacts and phone numbers and information.
Hey,
Are there any? Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, I got one comment. I know that it's good to have somebody outside of your state, a phone contact for somebody outside of the state. And so when our lines are all tied up, trying to get back and forth from a 801 number, it's good to have somebody that has like an out-of-state number. Can you explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. In the event of many emergency or disasters, the cell phone towers are damaged or cell phone communications doesn't take place, the circuits are overrun. Being able to use an outside circuit or a different phone number from a different area, that may get through. And again, it may only be by texting, but that's certainly an option and certainly a way to communicate. But I think in the event of a disaster or an emergency, you need to cover all your bases and make sure you have a way to communicate in all. The disaster could be covering all the local areas, so local help isn't going to be available. How long would it take you to get support or information or help in the event of a local disaster or a widespread disaster? I read a book about 5 Days at Memorial. It was about a hospital in Katrina, and it took of the most critical places. The hospital had all kinds of emergency generators that all failed because of the water levels and everything else. It took 5 days before any of those people could be rescued, the most critical people. And if you're not one of those critical people, how long will it take you to get emergency support? So be aware of being able to have an evacuation plan, a place where you could go outside of the area, information, phone numbers, emails, so that you could possibly contact them as you get outside of that area. Evacuation, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Dave. I just wanted to say for us as a family, I have a really big zipped up 3-ring binder that's bright red and it's got lots of pockets in it. And I keep all the stuff that you're talking about in that binder. So my kids know, my husband knows that in the event of some sort of evacuation or emergency, no matter what, we grab that and bring it with us because it has birth certificates, marriage certificates, Social Security, like all of those things, plus all of the things that you're talking about. And it just makes it so less stressful, even in a non-emergency time when I'm trying to find someone's birth certificate. So that's kind of a cool thing to have on hand with this household information.
Awesome, awesome plan. Should be a part of all of your plans. These are things that you should be aware of. What did you take when I was evacuated? What did I grab? I grabbed my laptop and I grabbed my wedding photos. I don't know why, but that was something that was important to me. So as you prepare your documents, think about the things that are most critical and what your family would need. It's great to make digital copies. Just take pictures with your phone, store them on a flash drive or whatever you want to put them on that you're comfortable, and make sure you have an emergency evacuation plan. Emergency transportation. The roads could be down. How are you going to get out? Hopefully you have a horse in your backyard. Well, it's just an option. You may want to consider that as part of your emergency plan for your family. Okay, family practice. How do you test? Or if anybody has any comments, go ahead. I had a personal experience with our family. I had 2 little boys. We lived in a little house, little 2-bedroom house, and we had just practiced a fire drill with my 2 little boys. We had opened the window and my wife had helped put them out the window while I was on the other side of the window helping them escape. It was just a practiced fire drill for our family. I hope that all of your families, in school they have fire drills, at work you have fire drills. I hope as a family you have a fire drill. What happened is we had a fire in our kitchen. I had just put in a double deadbolt lock on our front door that had to be opened with a key. The key rack happened to be hanging in the kitchen. It was a plastic rack where all of our keys were. We could not open the front door when that fire started in our kitchen. I could not find the key. The rack had melted in our kitchen, and I was fumbling on the floor to find the key that would open the front door so that we could escape out the front door. But my wife had gone into the boys' bedroom and lowered them out the window that we had just practiced, like just a week or a few days before the actual emergency that took place in our family. So what about cell phone messages? A phone tree can be very helpful in the event of an emergency. I am part of a church group, and when one of the bad fires took place in Lake Arrowhead, which is up in the mountains, in 24 hours, every family of about 300 families had been contacted by phone. We knew exactly every family that had evacuated and where they were within a 24-hour period. Great opportunity to prepare or practice your drills. As part of Eagle Mountain Emergency Communications, we do an emergency communications drill every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Jeff and Melissa participate. I participate. There's about 25 or 30 different amateur radio operators that participate in that drill and check in by radio. And it's a great tool. Whatever tool you have, you use those. I would encourage you to think about that communications and how important that is to you. With amateur radio, you can contact people across the world. So make sure your family has an emergency meeting place and some options. You need to make sure family pets are taken care of. All those things are part of your family practice and your family drills, and a great thing to practice. Any more comments before we go on? Okay, let's move on. Radio communication drills. We just briefly talked about Eagle Mountain has an organization called the Eagle Mountain Emergency Communications Team, and they also have an organization called CERT. Both of those kind of work together. We are working in the city to make sure the emergency communications team is in place, and that we have the community emergency response team, CERT team, in place. It could be days or weeks before we have support as a city for emergencies. All these different organizations. We have been involved with UCARES, Utah County Amateur Radio Emergency Services, and that's another organization. They all help provide training and skills and information to help you prepare for emergencies. We also are part of RACES, Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Services, which is another organization. There are clubs that participate in emergency communications, the UVAR Club, the UARC Club. All of these, as a city, we're working on putting together a repeater system for the city. It could be linked to other repeaters. But all of these are part of emergency communications and become tools. Every year, twice a year, the amateur radio community has a drill called Winter Field Day and Summer Field Day. On Field Day, we take our radio equipment, set them up off the grid where we can run our own power and operate our radios in the event of an emergency or disaster. There are many different church groups. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has an ERC group. Saturn happens to be the Salvation Army emergency response team. Red Cross has a team. TERT in Timpanogos emergency response team. So there's lots of information. The very last topic is about digital modes and pictures. I have a radio that has a camera and I can transmit those pictures. It could be of somebody or some location, and I can send videos and pictures and information through amateur radio. Just part of radio communications. Any more comments? Anybody have anything they'd like to say before we go on?
Yep.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, for those of you who are like, this sounds super overwhelming, I don't know if I can do ham radio or some of those things. It's okay to just listen in. You know, like, it takes a license to communicate on it, but to listen in and to hear what's going on. It took me a while before I was even comfortable doing the city checks and doing those drills and different things. So like, and there's lots of people on the volunteer team that are like super enthusiastic about helping other people get licensed. So if you want to get connected with someone like that, email Dave and just see if there's someone that will let you listen in or meet up and let you hear what's going on, because it can be a little bit overwhelming at first, but it's not as scary as it seems.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Any other comments? Okay, let's talk about becoming an amateur radio operator. There are 3 different licenses in the amateur radio community. There is the technician license, which is your entry-level license. Today, that license is good for 10 years. It costs you $14. Once you pass your exam, you'll never have to take it again. Those questions change every 4 years, but as long as you keep your license current, there's even a 2-year grace period that allows you to renew your license. And if you wait 12 years after your license is expired, you could have to take your exam again. The question is 35 questions on your exam. It's multiple choice, and every answer to every question is published, and you can study that. So I have helped 2 9-year-olds, 9 or 10-year-olds get their license. They were 4th graders or 5th graders, and I've also helped 90-year-olds get their license. It may not be for everyone, but I believe a lot of people can become licensed, and it could be a valuable tool. The most common radios used for emergency communications are called HTs, handy-talkies. They look just like a walkie-talkie, but they have a range of hundreds of miles because of the repeater system that also supports them. Those average radio cost about $25. There is no age restriction for an amateur radio operator. I've known an amateur radio operator that was 5 years old, and so any of you could become licensed. We talk about line of sight and radio communications, which is as far as you can see. A lot of radios will use that line of sight, and there won't be any obstructions. There are ways to get signals to bounce around and over the line of sight, and expanded communications depending on weather and temperature and all those things. There are online study sites that allow you to practice and practice. There are a lot of amateur radio operators that want to help other people become licensed. There are many clubs and local operators that will assist or help you. This is a great place if you wanted to find out all the amateur radio repeaters that are in the area. A repeater is placed up on a mountain, takes your little tiny handheld, you transmit to that repeater, and it transmits on the other side of the mountain automatically for you and boosts up the power or the signal of your repeater. There are more expensive radios that can be put in cars, mobile radios. I have a radio in my car. I have a radio in my home. I have radios I carry around with me. And they're all part of the amateur radio tools. Let's go on to our next slide. Any more comments about the licenses? And the next level in amateur radio is the general class license. This is the second level license. This is where worldwide communications takes place. So this can be all a part of your pursuit of an amateur radio license. You get your first license, you use your radio, and then you can pursue getting a general class license or even the extra class license. We use the HF bands, which are different frequencies in the emergency communications bands. The emergency communications bands start at 2 meters and 70 centimeters, and even 1.25 are most common for emergency communications. But again, it just depends on the radios and what you want to use and how much you want to do. With a base station, you can run from 100 watts to 1500 watts, extremely high power. But to get that license, it's a little more technical. They want to make sure that you're not causing interference with your radios. There are different antennas that will help improve your communications. As a general class license, you can start giving exams. You can give exams to any of the newbies, the new technician license, and it's a great opportunity. The radios are a little more expensive when you get into your general class license. And the last license we want to talk about is the extra class license, which is the highest level in amateur radio. It gives you all bands and all privileges. It gives you all tools. You can now become a licensed examiner for all different licenses. You'll become a leader in the ham radio community. You may be asked to teach different information and different topics, like what we're doing tonight, to help other people become more efficient with radio communications. The radio cost is pretty much the same as the general class license. Radios can cost up to thousands of dollars, as much as a car, but it certainly provides opportunities and information. There's lots of awards and contests and information. So that's a quick overview of amateur radio and that tool for you to become able to communicate around the world in addition to emergency communications. The Eagle Mountain team has the Eagle Mountain Emergency Communications team. We need your support. We're looking for anyone in the community who'd like to become licensed. We sponsor exams here at Eagle Mountain. They're held right at City Hall. And those exams allow people to become licensed or to upgrade their license. There is no fee other than the exam fees, which we have an exam coming up Saturday, March 27th for anyone who'd like to become licensed. There are virtual classes we're holding online. You can go online and take those practice tests, and you could become a licensed amateur radio operator. And who knows the good work that you could do as a licensed operator, whose life you may be able to save because you've taken the time to learn how to become an emergency communications operator.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the examples of when ham radio operators have been needed for different disasters? I mean, we have like wildfire and lost people in a mountain, right, like all those. Can you give some examples of some of those?
Absolutely. I have been personally involved in 2 different fires, the Blue Cut fire and the Pilot fire that took place in California. It involved evacuations, involved people. And we were able to communicate the status and the information every day, twice a day. I would report in the morning and the night the status of the fire, the amount of people that were evacuated, the things that take place. In the video we showed at the beginning, you will see how destitute people were in the event of an emergency. There was an earthquake that took place in Japan, and Japan got a double whammy because after the earthquake, there came a tsunami. And if you didn't get destroyed by the earthquake, the tsunami and the waves in the ocean took care of the rest that were surviving. So let's take an example of COVID. What items did you not have on your shelf that your family needed that weren't available when you were involved in COVID? That's what happens in an emergency or disaster. I know toilet paper was really hard to find. I don't know if any of you have fixed that problem in your home or your families, but that's what happens. The Boston Marathon was a great event. They shut down cell service because the bombs or the explosives were being triggered by cell phones. So there was no communications in the middle of the Boston Marathon. Runners were still running the race. Amateur radio was there because they supported that activity. They communicated to the buses, go to this location, pick up these runners, and nobody knew where the buses were going, but the buses were communicated through amateur radio of where the drop-off places were, and they were shadowed by all the officials of that activity and events. Hurricane Katrina. In the very last of our presentation tonight, we're going to show a video about Katrina and how amateur radio was involved. Hurricane Harvey in Texas. Experience after experience. I was invited to go to Puerto Rico to provide emergency communications in Puerto Rico to try to help with the situation that was uncontrollable there. And I unfortunately did not have all the resources to be able to go to Puerto Rico at that time. I did have a job and I had a family, and I would have liked to have gone. Many ham radio operators will be part of, and even in my own home, I can sit on my radio and pass emergency communications to families around the world. Hey, we just want to report to you. We've received a message about your family, and all those things take place. Hope I've answered your question, Melissa.
Yeah.
So do you have neighbors that may need your support or your help? Do you know of some of your neighbors that have special needs? You, as an amateur radio operator, could be involved in providing support for them or for your own family. And like getting back to that question, how long can your family survive without emergency support or without the tools that you have? What a great opportunity to become a solution in the community and not a problem because of your expertise or your talents.
Communication was gone. Cell phones died, nothing worked.
Without the ham radios, we were not able to communicate with our shelters because the phone lines are down. We weren't able to communicate with our other resources like FEMA and MEMA and the Office of Emergency Management.
With no communication whatsoever, with all the systems down, it was very important to Dr. O'Brien.
Communications are extremely fragile, and that tends to be our biggest issue.
As soon as the wind died down just a little, I was up stringing antennas up on the roof. Immediately began to pass emergency traffic, physicians, nurses, any state, bring your license. We need medical supplies, additional vaccines, tetanus.
I was handling HF traffic, emergency traffic, and a lot of it. There were requests for rescue. There were still people trapped in dormitories at some of the universities in New Orleans. I handled a lot of emergency traffic there. Tough, massive. Let's face it, this is the greatest natural disaster we've had in the United States. It's really been an experience for me, and I'm glad to help.
I wound up setting up in a Walmart parking lot. I was receiving traffic over the HF net, a lot of search and rescue. People trapped in attics, people trapped on roofs. There was a woman in labor with serious complications, and she was not going to make it if she didn't get out. They couldn't get a helicopter into that hospital. The helicopter got into Tulane Hospital, and then they had a boat en route to pick her up. And we had her ready to go, and getting in the boat, she got out safely and got into the chopper. That was a real heartwarming experience.
Because I am from New Orleans, this region is a very deep and super important part of who I am. I had to do something. This is my first emergency as a ham radio operator. We put up an antenna at the Red Cross headquarters in Brookhaven, set them up with a radio base, moved down to Gulfport, did some work there, slept in a school. It's better than sitting home and watching it on TV. It's very difficult for me because I'm from New Orleans. I went ahead and got my ticket after 9/11 because I wanted to be of some use. I love the idea of talking on the radio to people on the other side of the planet who you've never seen. And so I did it so that I would be of use. And it's paid off. It's really paid off.
It was such a relief to myself and Dr. Muller and Dr. Bryan to have Mike and all those people out there that helped to communicate with him. It's definitely a definite warm, heartfelt thank you from me and from our staff.
Without the ham operators, we really don't have a way to communicate. And I'd like to say to the ham operators that helped us with this hurricane that they have been a wonderful asset. They've always had a smile on their face, they work really long, hard hours, and they were there to support us in every way that they could. So I say a heartfelt thank you from the shelter members, from the staff, and also from the Red Cross.
Cell phones, landline telephones, internet, email. Outside of that, what is there? I mean, if it's all down, it's down, and if you can't get at the airwaves via the ham operators, then there's no communication. Thanks, guys.
Myself personally and the Red Cross truly offers their complete and wholehearted thanks. And I think the American people offer their thanks in that the people in this area are really appreciative of what their efforts are, because from what I understand, you're all doing this as full volunteers, no recompense, you're paying your own way, and that goes really above and beyond anything that I have known before. So a very wonderful, heartfelt thanks, and keep coming back. And if there's anything that we can do for you guys, let us know.
Are you prepared? Every second Thursday in Eagle Mountain, I believe that will still be the schedule. We have a emergency planning meeting for the people of Eagle Mountain. We cover different topics from first aid, how to stop the bleed, from emergency response, from there's lots. We do an earthquake demonstration. We do just hundreds of things that we feel will be beneficial to the people in the community to help you prepare. We've done things about go kits, what should be in your emergency kit. We sponsor and provide information about that. We even provide little gifts for the members of the community. All of these, if you'd like to become involved in CERT, which are basically kind of search and rescue, people can triage, just all kinds of things. We could use your help in CERT or in emergency communications. The CERT email is on this slide, and we'll go into one more slide, which will be a video about Katrina, so you guys can see how ham radio was very involved in. One of the cliches for amateur radio is amateur radio never fails. In the event of an emergency, amateur radio gets put to the test, and it helps people with all kinds of needs and communications to families. We have one more slide coming up after that. Then we're going to go talk about FEMA has this great website. I encourage all of you. I have a copy of it with me. It allows you to put together a template for your family for your emergency planning. Any more comments from the group? Anything you guys would like to share?
Great stuff, Dave. Thanks so much for sharing all of it.
Yeah, this has been really nice. It's definitely, ham radio has definitely opened my eyes in the emergency preparedness community. So it's a great opportunity, and I appreciate all that you do, Dave. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys for your support. In Eagle Mountain, we have over 250 amateur radio operators. We'd like to add another 250 for you and your family and your children. Be a great way for them to become involved in the community and become licensed operators. We will do all we can to help you, and it is a very viable opportunity for anybody who'd like to become licensed. We'd like to help you. There's a very large group in the community in several of the cities that I'm aware of that also sponsor and help and provide that information. Well, that's basically, does anybody have any questions about what we presented tonight and anything that you would like to know about before we close our presentation?
Dave, there's one more thing I'd like to add, is you go to the Eagle Mountain City's website and you go to the emergency management under departments, and we have a lot of information there for you to look at and go through. And Dave's contact information is there, and so is our CERT, Rich Rutledge. His information is there as well. So if you guys, anybody has any questions or anything at all, feel free to email me or Dave or Rich or even Melissa. I bet she would love to hear from you as well.
Oh, yeah. I love hearing from residents, and I just want to say, sometimes when we have these trainings, it feels like we can kind of be drinking from a fire hose, and it gets overwhelming. And I just want everyone to take a deep breath and realize that the most important thing is that you do something. I think we get really caught up in making sure that we're doing the perfect thing or everything all at once. But even if you put extra granola bars in your purse, or you get these phone numbers written down on a small little card that you stick in your pocket always in your wallet, those little steps are what's going to help you get even just a little bit closer. Being prepared is all about layers and doing just a little bit at a time, just incremental steps. And it's never meant to be something that's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Panic. Like, it's meant to just, like, when it's not scary, stop and think about some of these things. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your family. And like Jeff said, email us. This is probably one of my favorite topics to talk about. So if you email me, you know you're going to get a response. So, and I just want to thank again, David, for doing this presentation, and Jeff for taking the time out of his busy schedule and spending this time with us tonight. So I am just grateful for all that our volunteers and staff do in our city. So thank you, Eagle Mountain. It's been really great to spend this night with you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys, all. We hope you all become licensed operators or get involved in preparing or planning for your family. Critical need. Thank you, guys, very much.